All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's a funny thing. In person, there's this sort of shift in the energy when people are ready for the talk to begin. And here in this virtual space, somehow there's like a change in the way the Zoom counter of participants is going. That somehow signals to me that many of you are here and ready to start. I hope that you all had a relaxing 3-day weekend, a chance to connect with friends and family, to take good care of yourselves, and that you had a safe holiday. I know that the news from Illinois is very painful and hard to see. For those of you with friends and family in that area, I hope that everyone is safe. And for all of us, I know that the impact on gun violence on our lives has become increasingly difficult to carry. So take good care. This is the second in the summer lecture series for the 2022 summer internship program. And I'm really honored to introduce Dr. Janine Clayton, who comes from us from the Office of Research in Women's Health. Many of you have heard me in the Resilience series talk about the power of practicing gratitude. And so before I introduce Dr. Clayton, I'm going to take a moment just to share how very grateful I am for her leadership and her focus on health equity, and especially her focus on the health of women and children. Dr. Clayton is the right person to lead us through these very uncertain times as we navigate a changing landscape around women's health. I want to also say how grateful I am to her continued support for the Office of Intramural Training and Education. So if you are a high step student, it is possible that you are here because of ORWH funding. If you are an HSIP student benefiting from this curriculum, it is because of ORWH funding. If you are outside NIH and you've come to the Resilient Scientist series, then you should thank Dr. Clayton for funding. I arrived here and was told 15 years ago, and I was told that the Office of Research in Women's Health was one of the best partners with the OITE all the way from my first year, and that has been the case ever since. And so I am really grateful for both Dr. Clayton's leadership in the research arena, the policy arena, and in the education and career and mentoring arena. So today we really have a really important hour here, listening to a little bit about her past, how she became interested in women's health, what she is doing, what she sees as challenges in the future. Dr. Clayton's going to give a brief talk, and then we will all have a chance to ask questions. Just to give you a sense of her accomplishments and where she's been, she was the Deputy Clinical Director at the National Eye Institute for 7 years prior to joining the Office of Research in Women's Health. She directs that office and is the Associate Director for Research on Women's Health here at NIH. She received her undergraduate degree from Johns Hopkins and her medical degree from Howard University. And it's always a delight to talk to somebody who has been in the DC area for a long time. So many transient folks who come from work and then think about going somewhere else. Go Howard. We have so many Howard alum and current Howard students here in the summer program, and I know that it's exciting to hear from Dr. Clayton, given that background. She has published many, many papers, received many, many awards, and has done some really important things. Most importantly, shaping US policy on how we look at gender determinants, sex and gender determinants, and health. This is really important if you identify as female, if you love others who identify as female, having a robust research enterprise that looks at sex and gender and the intersection of health is critically important. So we have a lot to be grateful for Dr. Clayton and her work here at NIH and beyond. So without any additional time away from the discussion, I'm going to turn the floor over to her. She will give a talk and then take questions.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for that super warm welcome. I really appreciate it. That was really sweet and kind. Thank you, thank you. This is one of the most fun things I get to do. And so I'm excited and honored to be here with you. And so we're going to talk a little bit about my story, as you heard from Dr. Milgram. Then I'll talk a little bit about women in STEM careers today, what I do every day, putting science to work for the health of women, and our programs at the Office of Research on Women's Health, or ORWH for short. So there we go. Let me move this out of the way. There we go. So how I got here. I like to tell this story because I remember being in your seat, and I enjoyed hearing these stories from folks that I would see. And so I'm going to share it with that in mind. As you heard, I started at Johns Hopkins University for undergrad. In fact, my first job at Hopkins was working in the psych department, showing kids pictures of people doing different jobs and asking them about their gender. I couldn't believe that that was my actual first job at Hopkins. My real first job was delivering newspapers, but my first Hopkins job was that in the psych department. And so I went on to start at Harvard Medical School and thought everything was going great. And then found myself expecting. My husband and I were not planning that at the time. And early on, there were some issues and questions about if everything was going well, and had some medical complications and decided to transfer to Howard University College of Medicine. I am a native Washingtonian, so it was coming home for me. And I felt like at the time, I had been trying to make my career happen, working super hard to try to get where I was going, and that this was something that was an unplanned diversion or surprise. But I will share with you very honestly that it had an impact on my confidence and my ability to do what I was trying to do. So it was hard to navigate that time. I am very, very blessed and fortunate to have a very supportive family and friends, and Howard was an incredibly nurturing and supportive environment and just where I needed to be. And went on to do residency. I did a surgery internship at Howard, and then went on to do residency at Medical College of Virginia, which is now Virginia Commonwealth, under Virginia Commonwealth, and did, so that was ophthalmology at MCV, and then came to NIH to do a fellowship after going back to Hopkins to do another fellowship. And here is me with Dr. Vivian Penn, the first full-time director of ORWH, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how that happened. So I did a fellowship, at the Wilmer Eye Institute in cornea, the front part of the eye. And, you know, it felt like coming back to myself when I did that fellowship. And I say that because I told you what happened when I went to medical school. And this was what I really wanted to do. And so I felt like I had worked hard and was fortunate enough to be able to stay in what I wanted to do. And my passion is in ophthalmology or eye health. And so I was doing that for a very long time, and at the National Eye Institute, and became deputy clinical director, which is a leadership position, as you know, in the intramural program, working on autoimmune eye disease. These are diseases that the immune system somehow decides that the eye is not part of itself and attacks the eye. And I came across this meta-analysis, a worldwide paper that reviewed blindness across every country for which data were available, that was disaggregated by gender. And this paper showed that 2/3 of the world's blind or visually impaired are women. And I looked, I said, let me look for the US, let me go 2/3. I was not taught this in medical school, was not taught this as a resident. I was there and attending. I did not know this. And the data here, which you don't need to look at, are our US data. The fact that we couldn't explain that difference was something that really bothered me. It's also something that really drove me to be interested in sex and gender differences and the health of women. So fast forward a little bit of time, I ended up joining the NIH Office of Research on Women's Health as Dr. Vivian Pin's first, her special assistant, and then her deputy director, and then Dr. Collins selected me to be the director in 2012. And I always like to show this slide because it recognizes the legacy of some amazing women that came before. First, Dr. Ruth L. Kirstein on the left, the first woman director of an institute at NIH. In the middle, in the bright pink, you see Senator Barbara Mikulski from the great state of Maryland, really important leader in the Senate, and our longstanding congresswoman who advocated for many, many years for women's health. To her right, in the pale pink, is Dr. Bernardine Healey, the first and so far only woman director of NIH who initiated the Women's Health Initiative. And then on the other side is Dr. Vivian Pin. So this is a little bit of the history, but fast forward to today, ORWH is now the focal point for women's health research at NIH. One thing I want to say about the founding of NIH is the fact that it was founded out of advocacy. It was women in Congress, the Women's Caucus, which is a bipartisan, bicameral group that essentially demanded that NIH create an Office of Research on Women's Health. And so we have a long history in terms of inclusion as being part of our why. So sex and gender differences in research, I'm going to shift here a little bit in terms of my story, why I thought that was so important. And you heard from Dr. Milgram early on, these notions of sex and gender are so critical to health and disease, and our expanded understanding of sex and gender are factors that I think we all are continuing to learn even more, and how they intersect with other factors are important for everyone's health. I'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to give you a little bit of data on the issue of disaggregating results by sex. So on the left here, I promise you I don't have a huge amount of data in my talk, but on the left here you see a pretty standard graph, bar graph with a, let's see, is this the pointer? Yeah, pointer. Okay, so you can see aggregated data with disease impact on the y-axis. This is a control, this is a treatment. This looks like this treatment didn't do anything, right? So let's throw that treatment out. Well, if you disaggregate the data by sex, this is what you see. In the males, the treatment was associated with a reduction of disease impact. In the females, the treatment was associated with a higher disease impact. And this is data that comes from this aggregated data. You may say, Dr. Clayton, that is really too good to be true. That doesn't happen in real life. It's not that different. So here's the real life data from which I took that information. This is Louise McCullough's work. This is a model of stroke, and this is a PARP1 inhibitor. And the PARP1 inhibitor resulted in a reduction in percent infarct or stroke area in the male animals, these are rodents, and an increase in the stroke area in the female animals. So stroke damage, stroke reduction, opposite effect, completely opposite effect, because this cell death pathway is working through nitric oxide and PARP1, and this PARP1 inhibitor has having an effect only on the way the pathway works in males. So disaggregating data by sex provided novel findings, number one. It also made sure that we didn't throw out this compound where we thought that it didn't do anything. Here's some more data. Again, promise there's not a lot. And this is GTExt, genotype tissue expression. It's a common fund study, and they're looking at gene expression in genes in males and females. They were looking at 44 tissues across the body. Here are the number of sex-biased genes by organ. The color coding corresponds here. And on the right, so there are a lot of them. In fact, there are 13,294 genes across 44 tissues that exhibited some level of sex-biased expression. And here are the relationship between gene trait association and sex. So red is female, blue is male. So you're not surprised to see the balding pattern associated with male, this gene. You're also not surprised to see this gene associated with breast cancer in females, but you might be surprised to see that there's a different gene associated with birth weight in males and females. So gene expression at the tissue level also differs by sex. So sex operates at the cellular level, at the subcellular level, of course, at a system level, like our immune system. You've been hearing from COVID information that actually, in general, at a global level, more men are dying from COVID than women. Women have a more robust immune system. Generally, you'll hear more from Dr. Fauci in the future, and that is much more complicated than just that. But also sex has effects at multiple levels of the biology. And then all of these levels are interacting with each other at the same time. Add gender to that and our interactions in the world and many, many other factors that play a role in our clinical care. So how does the fact that we know less about female biology and women's health generally play out in real life? So I think you might be surprised to know that women with heart attacks or myocardial infarction receive less guideline-based diagnostic tests and less invasive treatments. So we have guidelines that are based on standards, and women are less likely to receive those guidelines, to get treatment according to those guidelines. Women with atrial fibrillation, a disease that causes clots to form, are less likely to receive anticoagulation treatment, anti-clotting treatment with a medication called warfarin, which means that they're at greater risk for stroke. And here's something pretty basic. When women are found unresponsive in public, they are less likely to receive CPR from paramedics. So here's how that knowledge plays out, that knowledge gap plays out in real life. And because of that knowledge gap, it was very important to us to be able to advocate for a policy that would make some change. And that is the NIH policy on sex as a biological variable. This policy went into effect 2016. And it states that NIH expects that sex as a biological variable will be factored into research designs, analyses, and reporting, vertebrate, animal, and human studies. And also that strong justification from the scientific literature or other relevant considerations must be provided for applications proposing to study only one sex. So up to this point, there were many, many single-sex studies without justification, and many studies did not account for sex as a biological variable. I'll be happy to come back to that later on when we have the Q&A session, but just a little bit of that, basically, the first section of my story. I'm going to shift gears to tell you a little bit about where I see women in STEM careers right now. This data is from the American Association of Medical Colleges, or AAMC, and they're showing representation of women in academic medicine. Over half of medical school applicants are women. Despite that, only 18% of the deans are women, 18% of the chairs are women, and you can see a steady decrease in that proportion. You may say that's just a leaky pipeline with women passively leaking out. It'll fix itself over time now that the pipeline is stoked. Unfortunately, this has been the case for many years, and it's been well past the time that the pipeline has been stoked. And so here's the data disaggregated by race and ethnicity. I know you can't read these, and I'm just going to highlight for you that women of color have what I call a double whammy, both from gender and race and ethnicity, and their progress is significantly lower than women in general. So I use this phrase, women's progress in medicine has been stymied, because to me, it seems like there are system-wide issues that are accounting for the fact that women are not progressing at the rate that you would expect by the proportion that they are representing in the early parts of the career ladder. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a compounding effect on this pre-existing gender inequity. The pandemic has disproportionately affected both women in science and parents in science because of the many, many work hours associated with those career choices. and the fact that there are been significant challenges in terms of childcare as individuals have been working at home, not able to be in the lab, not being able to be where their research is located. And that's translated into fewer women first and corresponding author papers, and fewer, it's not on this slide, but fewer opportunities to serve on peer review assignments, which is an important aspect of career development. And interestingly, those with older children or no children did not report the same impact on productivity. Certain fields, of course, haven't been as affected, but I think most of us here in the biomedical research space are very concerned with STEM. And the women with the youngest children cut their research time the most. Here's the data disaggregated. This is actually for women, and this is all scientists together showing you their data. Mothers with at least one child under 5 were spending 17% less time on research, and a variety of suggestions have been made. I think this is going to be a continuing problem, and I'm very concerned about hemorrhaging of women scientists from the biomedical research workforce. That would profoundly affect the questions that we ask and the equity that we are trying to advance. So you heard me talk about a leaky pipeline, and I don't like that analogy because I don't think that's really how it works. It wasn't that way for me in my career. And I think this proposal of a braided river as the new metaphor for career paths in science is much more appropriate. We know individuals tend to move in and out of roles and responsibilities and positions in science. They may start businesses, they may be in academia, they may be in science policy, they may take up patent work. Many people take different paths to get to science and science careers. They have to take off ramps or go through some of these tributaries and on ramps as they go and have military service or take on full-time caregiving responsibilities before they re-engage with formal education. And these experiences bring new ideas, unique perspectives that are creative, practical, and important to the robustness and innovativeness of our science. And they promote interdisciplinary solutions to science. So this braided metaphor is the way that I like to think about STEM. This slide is intentionally blank to just give you a pause because the information I'm going to present next is something that is very disturbing. It's very disturbing to me that the United States is the most dangerous place in the developed world to deliver a baby. This data is from 2018 and the situation has not changed. If anything, has gotten worse. Here are the data compared to our peer countries. You don't need to be able to read these numbers or even really understand this graph to see that this US Black rate of maternal mortality far exceeds that of our peer countries and exceeds that of the US total. Here's US Hispanic and US White. What about the last 3 years? What about the pandemic that we're in? Unfortunately, I'm saddened to tell you that the rate has increased significantly in the United States for all women. For non-Hispanic Black women, there's been a nearly 50% increase in maternal mortality, 50, in the last 3 years, an increase in Hispanic maternal mortality as well. We know that African-American women are nearly 3 times as likely to die as white women related to maternal mortality. And American Indian Alaska Native women whose data are not here are twice as likely to die. These are not new trends. These are continuation of trends that are alarming and warrant focused attention. In general, we think of education as something that improves health and addresses and can help address health disparities. But I'm going to highlight for you this data. This is high school, less than high school, college, and college in terms of educational attainment. These are pregnancy-related maternal mortality rates. And I will show you that the rate for Black women with a college degree exceeds the rate for white women with less than high school education. Education does nothing for this health disparity. There's much work to be done. Across the country, we see differences in the health of women by state. Here's maternal mortality by state. The gray bar is the total for all women in that state, right? The red dot is for African American women. The blue dot is for white women. These are the states in order. This is work from the Georgetown Institute of Peace and Security. If you look at healthcare affordability, we see that higher maternal mortality and is associated with less healthcare affordability. And we also see differences across our country by insurance rate and what is called a security index. Here they looked at food insecurity, police protection, all kinds of other parameters. And what you can see is a very similar pattern. So maternal mortality is something that is not just related to health, it's related to how we are living and today. We like to say that, we don't like to say, but we often say that pregnancy is a stress test, both biologically and psychologically. And I tongue-in-cheek joke that we are failing our mothers throughout the life course. This is just kind of a graphic slide that shows the life course in the background, this EKG coming through. And here I'm going to highlight the fact that if a person experiences depression in their adolescence, they are more likely to experience that in later life in menopause. If a pregnant person experiences preeclampsia or gestational diabetes, they're more likely to become hypertensive or have type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease later in life. And so we call this looking at health through a life course perspective. We think of maternal mortality as the tip of this iceberg. Maternal morbidity is underneath of that. For every one woman that dies related to pregnancy, there are many, many, many more who experience maternal morbidity. And beneath that are social determinants of health, clearly playing a role in the health of people, pregnant people and women in this country. So I couldn't move from that really heavy presentation of data without telling you that we are doing something about it. We've been converging on this public health problem with coherent coordination. Here's some examples of efforts across the Department of Health and Human Services, whether it's HRSA, FDA, CDC, and here's some institute and center collaborations focusing on maternal mortality and morbidity. And our most recent effort is called Improve. Shifting away from that specific topic, it's not just about maternal health. We're also talking about infant health, which affects obviously the next generation. Among college-educated Black women, there are 3 times more infant deaths per 1,000 live births compared to infants born to white women with a high school degree or less. Again, that education. So now we're not talking about just about the woman or the pregnant person, we're talking about the infant more likely to die. So that affects future generations clearly. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all this data. Happy to talk about it more in the Q&A session, but to talk about the fact that beneath what we see that's happening in the health of women are social determinants of health. And we like to say those are conditions in the environments where people are born, live, work, play, worship, and age. And they affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. Generally, broad categories: built environment, healthcare access, quality, education, economic stability, and social and community context are some of them. So here's the multidimensional framework that we use at NIH to think about the health of women. I mentioned this life course perspective. Pre-pregnancy health of the woman is important to think about. And then this life course perspective. Internal factors affect health and disease, such as being male or female, genetic ancestry. External factors, such as gender, all the dimensions of gender, generation, race, and ethnicity. At an interpersonal level, community and societal level. This could be toxic exposures to chemicals or toxic exposures to toxic relationships. Those all interact at the same time and have different effects at different stages of the life course. And things that happen here can affect things that happen here. So that's what we call health of women across the life course. So a couple of other pieces of data I want to share with you. Today, among African American women over the age of 20, nearly 50% have heart disease. And today, over half of Black women in the United States over the age of 20 have high blood pressure. Half, over half. African American women are also twice as likely to have a stroke, a consequence of lifelong hypertension, as compared to non-Hispanic white women. So these are the data. Racial and ethnic differences in women's life event exposures also contribute to health disparities in later life. On this x-axis is age. On the y-axis is the number of life events. So things, people dying, adverse life events. So those are higher here. And you can see at the beginning, around 45, we can see difference by race and ethnicity from the outset. These lowest rates are in Chinese, Hispanic, and Japanese women. This data is from the SWAN study. Study of women's health across the nation, long-term NIH-funded study, highly diverse cohort with over 3,000 participants. And from this study and supporting women's health research for many years, we learned that Black women face higher rates of life events and smaller declines in life events with age, so they're already happening earlier. Hispanic women face stronger initial declines and greater increases in life events later. And understanding these life event patterns can help us target where we want to intervene to try to prevent poor outcomes for all women, which is, of course, our goal. So we talked a little bit about disparities by race, is the way sometimes it's put, but it really isn't about race. It's really about racism. And the impact and disadvantages of the lived reality of racial and discrimination, racism and discrimination for many individuals, especially Black women and other women of color, is part of their lived reality, and it has health consequences. Psychosocial and physiologic stressors, including racial discrimination, have a biological toll. Dr. Arlene Geronimus calls this weathering. It's linked to certain inflammatory markers, premature aging, which is measured by telomere shortening. And there are deleterious consequences of life stressors, including racism and discrimination, down to the cellular level. And so we are concerned about all of these health effects and impacts as we try to manage research programs, policies, public health plans for the future. This study looked at predicting rates of dementia, Alzheimer's disease and dementia over the future 40 years based on US Census data from 2020. In terms of dementia, we see highest proportions in African Americans, intermediate for Hispanics, and lowest in whites at 10%. In terms of gender differences, today, 1.4 million more women have Alzheimer's disease than men, and that's projected to increase to 2.58 by 2060. Today, 3 times as many caregivers of individuals with Alzheimer's are women as compared to men. And here's the gender data projected with women in this orange bar and men in this blue bar. These sheer numbers are important because we need to address this because of its impact both on individual families and society. And this gender gap is something that is expected to widen over the next 40 years. So research that we support now needs to help us understand those sex differences and gendered impact in order to be able to have maximal impact at a public health level. We also are concerned about research on issues, factors, conditions, experiences that affect only females. And menopause would be one of those. There's not a lot of scientific research about menopause. We do have a robust portfolio here at NIH, but we need to see more to address all the research questions that we have. And I want to highlight Dr. Roberta, or she goes by Robbie Diaz-Brinton, who I met. She's a member of the NIH Director's Advisory Committee to the director, and I've been really impressed with her work. And she's been looking at brain changes during the menopausal transitions And so there are changes that occur both in structure, in energy and metabolism, and in, importantly, amyloid deposition. And she found out that the gray matter volume, which decreased in the transition, recovered in key brain regions for cognitive aging post-menopause. And she also found that amyloid beta deposition, an Alzheimer's marker, was more pronounced in peri and postmenopausal women carrying the protein that is a major genetic risk factor for late onset Alzheimer's disease, ApoE4. And so here I want to highlight that human menopause is a dynamic, she calls it a neurological and a neuroendocrinological transition that requires further research. So many research questions remain in terms of what we need to know to be able to improve the health of women. In this last section, I'm going to talk about what I have the privilege of doing most of the time at NIH, and that is the ORWH. Our mission is to expand women's health research. We work with all 27 institutes and centers, each and every one of which has research relevant to the health of women. We want to make sure that women and underrepresented racial and ethnic minority groups are included in NIH-supported research and to advance women in STEM. Because we imagine across NIH a world where sex and gender are integrated across the biomedical research continuum. We imagine a world where every woman receives evidence-based diagnostics, treatment, and care tailored to her own circumstances, goals, and needs. And we imagine a world where all women in science careers reach their full potential, but we're not there yet. So how are we going to get there? This is a research continuum slide, and we believe that incorporating considerations of sex and gender and race and ethnicity and age across the research continuum can advance rigor, make our research better, discovery, help us to find cool answers faster, innovation, help us to accelerate progress, and equity. So going from those preclinical studies where you study male and female mice, to those translational studies and those early phase clinical studies where you include male and female individuals in a way that makes sense for how they experience health and disease, to how we report our results and analyze our studies, as I showed you, sex disaggregated reporting, in terms of our publications, so that those publications inform future studies, so that we can move from the bench to bedside, from the bedside to the bench and back. How we teach any individual who's associated with health or science or research in our interprofessional education. How we deliver our care in a sex and gender appropriate way. Is this medication more likely to have side effects in men and women? Perhaps I'll start at a lower dose. You may have heard that the FDA has recommended a sex-specific dosage for a sleeping pill called Zolpidem or Ambien, because we now know women clear that medication more slowly than men do. That is a sex difference. It has nothing to do with anything else other than biology, so we need to account for it in our dosage recommendations. And of course, all of this should inform health policy and can all work together better to advance everyone's health. We do that through what we call signature research programs. And we, as I said, we work with all the institutes and centers. Our BIRCH program, the purpose of which is to advance women's health researchers, majority women, both women and men and others, are in our BIRCH program. And so they're doing women's health research. Our SCORE program is a disease agnostic sex differences research program. It's NIH's only disease agnostic center level sex differences program. And we have two administrative supplements. One is just on sex and gender, where we supplement existing awardees from all the 27 institutes and centers and those that signed on to a FOA funding opportunity announcement, so they can add either more of the other sex, or add more participants, or add more analyses to be able to look at sex and gender. And then our U3 program, understudied, underreported, and underrepresented populations of women, so we can drill down on a specific population of women. And our most recent program is our R01, NIH's first ever R01, focused on the intersection of sex and gender influences on health and disease. And we're working with 11 institute centers and offices on that program. All of this information is available on our website. Our BIRCH program, we have supported over 700 BIRCH scholars over the last 20-some years. And we have a robust interprofessional education page where we have e-learning courses listed here. And I'm going to wrap up here shortly. I want to make sure you know about these career development opportunities. There are called K awardees. There's some are for laboratory-based scientists, some are for mentored, some are for independent, some are for clinicians, some are for transitions. There are a lot of career development programs I want to make sure that you're aware of and get to know your K awards. And as I wrap up here, I may have talked about a lot of things that we do or things that I did or things that can be done to make your career happen. But I also talked about things that happened, and that is part of life. And there needs to be a balance, right? Focusing only on doing and less on being is a fast way to get you burnt out. And so that's something I do want to share with you as a lesson learned in our careers as journeys. It is important to seek out mentors and to apply for these programs and to network and to talk to leadership and think about leadership and give to others and say yes when people ask you to present at meetings like this. But it is also important to let things happen and express gratitude for what you have. And all of us are, that is something that I think is important for all of us. It's also important to really think about what you could do and not be limited by what other people think you could do or what has been done before, for that matter, and to welcome disruption or doing things differently, to say thank you and receive things when people are offering them to you, and to say no to things that are not right for you or not right for you at this time. And most important, to be authentically you and what that means and all the unique things that you bring to this world. Here, I'm going to share with you our Pearls of Wisdom series, and take a look here. We have science leaders offering career advice in this video series based on their experiences. These are 4 amazing women I'm choosing to highlight here. We also have many amazing men who are joined our Pearls of Wisdom series. If you want to connect with ORWH, you can do that through social media, through signing up for our quarterly publication or our monthly email, or sign up for any of our events. And we do have a webpage focused specifically on sex and gender and COVID. And at this point, I am really delighted to be able to switch gears and stop sharing and look forward to talking with all of you. We do have some time left for that. Thanks, Sharon.
We do. Thank you so much. Sometimes as I look at statistics and hear talks that highlight such shocking and disheartening health disparities, which we know are such a complex mix of bias and discrimination and embedded policies on top of biology and environment, they're so complex. I think it's easy to feel somewhat disheartened, but as the questions were coming in during your talk, I just want to balance that feeling. That is, it comes across in some of the questions of anger and frustration with the fact that so many of the trainees said, what can we do? What should we learn? What are next steps? And sort of that importance of looking at the data and taking action. There are some questions that sort of scattered throughout your talk, but 2 main areas. And one is to talk for you to spend a little bit of time talking about the disparities in maternal health, particularly for Black women and other minority groups. The second is to talk about transgender health and what the Office of Research in Women's Health and your focus on research that is gender-based can do to inform much better care for trans folks. So let's maybe start with the mortality rate for minority women and poor health outcomes. Several students put out hypotheses. Could it be related to food deserts and poor nutrition? Somebody asked whether you thought it was at all a part of the misinformation around the fact that Black people don't feel pain the same way as other races, sort of what some of the possibilities are. and how you think that can be teased out in the long term.
Great questions. And thank you, Sharon, for the context setting there, because it is a lot, and it's heavy data, right? I think the reality is data are part of our tools that we need in order to secure resources, attention, and energy to a problem that we want to solve. And that's how I look at the data, in addition to the families and communities behind the data, right? And so the issues that were raised, the potential factors, food deserts, absolutely, that's part of it. If your only option for healthy food is many miles away, and it's not safe for you to go many miles away, and it's very inconvenient, it is very challenging for anyone, certainly a pregnant person, to access healthy foods. And actually, we know that women broadly in this country make 80% of health-related decisions. And so we have to take into consideration things like access to care, exposure to environmental chemicals. So certain zip codes, which happen to be where more underrepresented racial and ethnic minorities may live, have higher levels of pollution, for example. So we're talking about, policies that have had an effect on certain populations that affect their health. And that's not just, you might hear about that for asthma, right? But that also affects all other aspects of health, including maternal health. What about bias in care, discrimination in care, this issue of that study from UVA that's not that long ago that said, I don't know, whatever proportion it was an unacceptably high proportion of medical students who thought that Black people do not feel pain the same. That is part of it, because people not getting quality care can result in poor outcomes. It's been well documented. So in order to address that, one of the strategies that we've seen that can be helpful is with clear standards of care. And in the maternal mortality space, they're called AIM care bundles. These are lists of ways to treat a certain situation, like hemorrhage, maternal hemorrhage. So HRSA funded these bundles, where in California, we were able to see reductions in mortality from maternal hemorrhage if you followed the checklist, right? This is a situation, follow the checklist. We know that it's not as simple as just following the checklist, because the maternal mortality rates from maternal hemorrhage went down, but the disparity did not. So there's something else we're missing. And that's one of the reasons why I talked about psychosocial stressors, cumulative disadvantage, biological consequences of life. And that means that we need to think about a whole person perspective, not for health, even health research. We want to see, what do we do about it? We want to see more interdisciplinary approaches, more integrative approaches, where we see biologists and anthropologists and economists come together to solve a problem like the built environment, no healthy food in this area. And so work like what's being funded under Common Fund, Transformative Health Disparities Research, which is funding research to implement structural interventions to look at impact on health outcomes. Structural interventions like policy interventions, like financial interventions, like not health interventions. The health impact is a consequence. That's one of the ways. So two suggestions: integrative approaches, interdisciplinary approaches, and research that integrates more perspectives, understanding that health is situated in a context that we live in. I think, Sharon, for the second question, we work very closely with our another office in the Division of Program Coordination, Planning, and Strategic Initiatives, fondly known as DPCIPC, and that is the office called Sexual Gender Minority Research Office, or SGMRO. It's a fairly new office. We collaborate with them through our research program that I talked about, the Sex and Gender Admin Supplement Program. So in that program, we fund research to answer questions like the questions being posed in the chat. What are some of the consequences of gender affirming care? Biological consequences, I think I have that right, of gender affirming care. Yep. Those are the types of research questions that we fund under our Sex and Gender Admin Supplement Program. And now SGMRO has created their own program, Pattern After Hours, to expand that work, right? So here, I don't have time to go into all of those details. I think the most important thing is that somebody asks that question, right? Because those are the research questions that need to be asked and answered so we can inform care for everyone. So that the model that I showed you, sex and gender integration across the whole continuum, can inform and improve the care of everyone. So Sharon, I'm going to pivot back to you to see other questions in our time.
I want to ask, have you address a question looking at the reality of women in healthcare settings that often concerns are dismissed. Oh, you're emotional. Oh, you know, you just need a bubble bath kind of lack of seriousness around women's health issues. And do you have suggestions to women as consumers of healthcare to get good healthcare? You know, what goes into making sure you have a physician who is really gender affirming?
Yeah, it's well documented, as you said. The number one piece of thought I would share is that you have to be your own best advocate for your health and your life. And speaking up in a healthcare situation is so critical. That being said, I realize that even speaking up is no guarantee that you're going to be heard or treated respectfully. And so not accepting that and moving on to a provider that does provide the answers that you are asking for. Asking questions. Was this medication tested in men and women or people like me? What do we know about that? Are there side effects that I should be concerned about? Is this diagnostic test the one that's most appropriate for people from my community? Asking questions like that will help you to see if the provider that you're talking to is someone who pays attention to that or not, right? And then if they're not, then vote with your feet and find somebody who does, right? I think that's the bottom line. I hate to say it, but data show that if you have somebody else with you, when you do this, you get a better result as a person who identifies as female. You are more likely to be heard. It's not right. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And so if that works for you, if that's available to you to have somebody with you when you go, that's another approach to advocate for yourself, to arm yourself with as many tools to get the best care. To address this, we have created several online courses and our interprofessional health education. One's on bench to bedside. It talks about sex and gender differences in different diseases. Why women show up having a heart attack, but they don't say I have chest pain. You know, my jaw's bothering me. Maybe it's my tooth. Just a little short of breath this week. It's probably my allergies, right? So if you present that way, women can present that way having a heart attack. We want to make sure that providers know they need to work that person up for heart attack, just like the man who comes in sweating with crushing chest pain. And we need to make sure our portrayals of diseases portray both and everything in between. So as part of it.
The comments about being assertive in healthcare settings, you know, that starts with a belief that we have a right to be assertive. And in our resilience course, it's clear that it takes some time to get comfortable with that idea that I have a right to speak up. I have a right to vote with my feet, whether that's about a unsupportive or absent mentor or an unsupportive healthcare provider. There are some steps leading up to, I have a right to do this. And so hearing you start from there is I think a really important message today. Training healthcare professionals is one thing. I guess we have to arm ourselves to really be our best advocates. There's a question about hair products like relaxers and the potential health impact on Black women and other women who use various chemicals. And I know hair comes up a lot, cultural, family. There's so many things about hair tied to our communities. But there's also negative messages about hair. And I wonder if you could address a little bit of that from what the science says and what your thoughts about women's health are in that regard.
Sure, great question. So the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, NIEHS, does indeed have research in this space, looking at the chemicals, a variety of chemicals in cosmetics and hair products and their effects on the health of women, and specifically Black women in this case. And so there is a body of work that really talks about how harmful they can be, and the fact is that many girls, Black girls, are exposed to these chemicals even before they go into puberty. And so what does that mean over the life course in terms of risk for consequences of chemical exposure, toxicant exposure? There's no easy answer that I can share in terms of this causes this, but what I can say is that these chemicals have been found in some cases to be harmful in some circumstances. Knowing that, we are supporting research to help understand that better going forward. And that's another reason why we need as many diverse perspectives at the table in terms of when we decide what programs we are going to initiate and fund. Women ask different questions, women of color ask different questions, Black women ask different questions. And in order to be able to make sure that our research is addressing the health of people and we can just turn discovery into health for everyone, we need everyone at the table. And clearly, what I call the diversity dividend, it benefits everybody in the end in terms of innovation. So great questions. Again, that perspective of integrating exposures, external factors with internal factors, and not just thinking about genetic risk, but exposures to chemicals or relationships. Actually, more women are likely to die from homicide than from maternal hemorrhage while they're pregnant. That's your highest risk time as a woman or pregnant person of being killed is while you're pregnant. So we need to understand all those factors, and we just highlighted one or two of them. Great question.
So we're going to run out of time, and there are a lot of questions focused on what can we do, advocacy, how do we change things. I wonder if, as we wrap up, you know, I think a lot of times students look and they see leadership, and they don't realize that leadership comes from everywhere. You know, I was reflecting the other day on some of the gun safety protests here in DC that were organized by high school students, and standing there with my son feeling this overwhelming power that it was brought to us by our future leaders. I wonder if you can reflect on leadership for trainees at various levels and what you recommend that they do to be a part of these solutions.
Yeah, I would say to each and every one of these folks that are watching, you are the leaders of your own lives right now. You're the chief managing officer of your life. And you are the world's best expert on your body. World's best expert. You know, think about that. We are looking to you, not just be leaders of the future, as you said, Sharon, but leaders of today, because the challenges that we face today are ones that require everyone's input. And I think innovation, creativity, moving the needle, making progress one step at a time comes from all of us, whether that is the protest that you saw, or whether it is a student who said to me, she came to me, she had her sneakers on, she just come from the lab. She said, I want to make this fellowship that doesn't exist. I want to put this, this, and this. I'm like, okay, let's see how to make that happen.
Mhm.
And that innovation, that creativity, that energy, that demand for your future is something that is so important. From a science and research perspective, we are counting on your brilliance. We're counting on it. We're also counting on me personally, I'll just say this for myself, your passion, your empathy, your vision for the future, because we can't do this alone. And clearly we all, we are in this together, and we will be better together. It sounds trite, but the reality is science can solve society's problems, but not the way society is interacting with science right now, and not the way science is moving right now. But it has the potential. And just to wrap up, you said a little bit about how heavy the data is. And I get that feeling. Sometimes I put another little slide in there just to lighten it up. I didn't do that today because I think, this group, I feel like this group, that I'm inspired by them, by what they are bringing, by the fact that they're asking these questions, by the fact that they're here today, by the fact they're in a summer program. And so let me just send back to you all, lots of gratitude and thanks for your interest in science solving society's problems. And you, as chief managing officers of your life today, world's expert on your body and everything about you, and just ask that you bring together all those things to be authentically you, because we need you.
Thank you. You made one comment about mental health that really stuck with me. And I'd like to end by just asking you to reflect on your well-being and what you do to take care of yourself. We have been trying so hard here to change the dialogue around well-being, that scientists are actually whole people who take good care of themselves so they can take care of others. So if you would share what you do to take care of yourself, it would be a great way to wrap up.
Sure. For many of us, it's been a very sobering and difficult last few weeks. And one of the things that I have done is every single day gone for a walk or done some cardio for the last few, 10 days or something. That's not my regular rate. I mean, I do something, but not every day. Okay. And preferably outside. So I have a route and I'm trying to walk a little faster. I'm trying to do my intensity changes. But getting outside, feeling the sun on my face, just like making sure I do that has been really helpful to me. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to be, a panacea. I'm just saying it's something I'm doing to take care of myself. The other thing is, I'm not responding to all my emails on the weekend. I look at them once or twice just to make sure, depending on what's going on, but I'm not responding because I don't want people to think that they have to respond to me. I realize that if I respond, they're going to think they have to respond. So trying to do that so people understand there's space, and making space for these types of conversations every day. At the end of a meeting, making a little space for, did somebody say something that hit you the wrong way, or you're not clear what they meant, or, and I called somebody on something recently and I was wrong. And I said I was wrong. Oh, I thought you meant such and such. You used this word extremist. And I was like, what? But that's not what was meant. So I misunderstood. So making space for that. And if you say you can misunderstood as a leader, then maybe everybody else will feel like they can say I misunderstood or ask the question. So Sharon, back to you, and thank you for this amazing forum and for the series and for inviting me to be part of it.
Great. Thank you so much. Everyone keep having a good experience this summer. Keep taking good care of yourself, and we will see you at follow-up events the rest of the summer. Thank you, Dr. Clayton. Thank you so much.
Dr. Milgram.